The light in the conclave chamber was not born of fusion or fission, but of resonance. It pulsed from the crystalline heart of Catharia, flowing through veins of pure, grown silicate that formed the vaulted ceilings and the spiraling archways. It was a cold, intelligent light, a light that measured the truth in the vibrations of every spoken word. For generations, this chamber had been a place of placid contemplation, of logic given form, where the measured progression of the Cathar civilization was charted with serene certainty. Tonight, that certainty was a fractured shard, and the light felt like an interrogator. Elder Prime Vorlag stood at the focal point of the chamber. His chitinous plates a deep, lustrous obsidian that absorbed the ambient glow, making him a void in the sea of luminescence. Before him, suspended in a shimmering gravitic field, was the hololithic projection of a dead world, a barren sphere of ochre dust and frozen methane seas, designated Xylos 7. It was a world that should have been silent, a tombstone in a forgotten system. But it was not silent. A scar of impossible energy bloomed across its equator, a wound of such raw power that it distorted the projection, causing the crystalline light of the chamber to flicker in sympathetic agitation. It is a violation of all known principles, High Strategist Xenthos stated, his voice a low, grating frequency that resonated unpleasantly in the chamber's perfect acoustics. His own carapace was the color of hardened magma, scarred and pitted from countless strategic simulations, and a youth spent in the outer system patrols. He stood with his primary limbs clasped behind his back, a posture of restrained aggression. Natural phenomena do not behave this way. Tectonic upheaval does not generate coherent energy signatures. A planetary core collapse would be a chaotic event, not this rhythmic, structured pulse. He gestured a sharp talon at the projection, where the energy scar throbbed with the slow, steady beat of a colossal heart. It is artificial. It is deliberate. Vorlag did not turn to face him. His gaze remained fixed on the impossible wound on Xylos 7. He could feel the unease of the assembled conclave members arrayed in the tiered circles around them. A subtle shift in the collective psychic resonance, a discordant hum beneath the surface of their disciplined calm. The Cathar were a species defined by order, by the elegant and unwavering logic of the cosmos. They saw the universe as a grand, intricate equation, and for millennia they had been its most astute students. This anomaly on a dead world was a variable they could not place, an act of cosmic vandalism that threatened the sanctity of their understanding. "Your assessment is noted, High Strategist," Vorlag said, his voice a calm, measured baritone that smoothed the agitated frequencies in the room. "Lore Keeper Lyra, your findings. The archives must hold some precedent. A stellar phenomenon we have misidentified, an echo of a supernova from a forgotten epoch." From the shadows of a crystalline archway, a slighter figure emerged. Lore Keeper Lyra's shell was the color of mother of pearl, iridescent and seemingly fragile, yet it housed an intellect that contained the totality of Cathar recorded history. She moved with a silent grace that belied the weight of her knowledge. "Elder Prime, the archives are silent," she whispered, her voice like the rustling of ancient scrolls. "There is no known stellar event, no geological process that matches these readings. The energy is not thermal, nor kinetic in its primary expression. It is potential, a state of becoming. The closest analog in our records is the singularity state of a Genesis forge, but orders of magnitude greater and without a corresponding gravitational signature. It is as if a universe is trying to be born from within the planet's crust." The chamber fell into a profound silence, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the energy scar on the projection. A universe being born. The concept was so far beyond their experience that it bordered on theological, a domain of thought the Cathar had long ago abandoned in favor of observable reality. Vorlag felt a cold dread coalesce in his primary processing cluster. Fear was an illogical, primitive emotion, a relic of their species' savage past. Yet the unknown had a power that transcended logic. "Then we must gather more data," Vorlag declared, his voice firm, a rock against the rising tide of uncertainty. "Dispatch the long-range sensor probes, a full spectrum analysis. I want to know the composition of every molecule being energized in that fissure." "Probes are already en route," Xenthos countered, his tone sharp. "They will be within optimal scanning range in 3 cycles, but I must advise a more direct course of action. Logic dictates we prepare for the worst possible outcome. An unknown intelligence of immense power is revealing itself. We must assume hostile intent. The Grand Fleet should be mobilized, a perimeter established. If it is a threat, we must be prepared to cauterize it before it can spread." To cauterize a phenomenon we do not understand is the height of irrationality, Xanthos, Lyra interjected softly. What if it is not a weapon, but a message? What if it is not a birth, but a reawakening? To greet it with drawn blades would be to define the nature of our first contact before it has even begun. Reawakening? Xanthos scoffed, the sound a sharp crack in the resonant air. Nothing has lived in the Xylos system for 1 billion solar cycles. The system's star is a cold cinder. The planets are frozen graves. Whatever this is, it is alien to that place, and by extension to us. It is an intruder. Vorlag finally turned, his multifaceted eyes focusing on the high strategist. The Elder Prime's gaze was heavy, carrying the authority of centuries of leadership. Your fear is logical, Xanthos, but your conclusion is premature. We will not be governed by fear. We will be governed by data. The fleet will be brought to a state of readiness, but it will hold its position in the outer territories. No vessel will approach the Xylos system until we understand the nature of this anomaly. We will watch. We will listen, and we will learn. His command was absolute, the final word in a debate that had raged for days. Xanthos inclined his head in a gesture of reluctant acquiescence, his mandibles clicking softly in frustration. The conclave settled back into a tense quietude, their collective focus returning to the holographic wound on the dead world, waiting. The waiting was a torment. For 3 cycles, the Cathar civilization held its breath. The projection in the conclave chamber became the focal point of their existence, a constant, silent testament to their ignorance. The probes arrived, a swarm of silent observers that blanketed the Xylos system in a web of sophisticated sensors. The data began to stream back, flowing into the chamber's hololithic display as torrents of pure information. The initial readings were baffling. The energy was not radiation. It was a cascade of exotic particles held in a coherent state by a containment field of unimaginable strength. The field itself seemed to be woven from spacetime, a concept their most brilliant physicists had only theorized. But it was the source of the energy that shattered their understanding. It was not a natural occurrence. The probes, deep-penetrating scans pierced the crust of Xylos 7, revealing the truth beneath miles of dead rock and ice. Lyra was the first to decipher the geometric patterns. Her slender manipulators danced across a crystalline control surface, her mind sifting through petabytes of data with the speed of a sentient supercomputer. The iridescent sheen of her carapace seemed to dim as she processed the impossible truth. "It is a vessel," she breathed, her voice trembling for the first time in Vorlag's memory. The word hung in the air, electric and terrifying. On the main display, the projection shifted. The image of the planet dissolved, replaced by a wireframe schematic generated from the probe data. It was a shape of brutalist elegance, a long, angular form of incomprehensible scale. It was buried, interred within the planet's crust like a king in a sarcophagus. The energy scar on the surface was merely the incidental leakage from its awakening systems. The vessel itself was miles long, a city-sized weapon of war that had been sleeping for untold ages. Xanthos stepped forward, his earlier frustration replaced by a cold, grim certainty. "I was right," he stated, his voice flat. "It is a weapon, a dreadnought, buried, hidden, a sleeper waiting for a signal. We are that signal. Our expansion, our energy signatures, the light of our civilization. It has woken the beast." "A beast of whose making?" Vorlag asked, his own mind reeling. The Cathar were the oldest known spacefaring species in this spiral arm of the galaxy. They had encountered no rivals, no equals. They had believed themselves to be alone. This discovery was not just a strategic threat, it was a philosophical cataclysm. It was Lyra who provided the answer. Her manipulators froze on the console. A new set of symbols flared to life beside the schematic, archaic and jagged, utterly alien to the flowing script of the Cathar. "The archives, there are fragments, mentions in the oral traditions of the lesser species we uplifted. A name, a whisper from a pre-spaceflight era, a cautionary tale. They called them humans." The name meant nothing to Vorlag. He searched his own vast memory banks. "Humans? I find no record of such a species in the Conclave's direct contact logs." "You would not, Elder Prime?" Lyra said, her voice now hushed with a chilling reverence. "They are from before, long before. The fragments speak of a species that burned with impossible speed. They rose from their home world's gravity well and consumed their solar system in what to us would have been the span of a single generation. They were brilliant, chaotic, and self-destructive, a paradox of creation and annihilation." She gestured to the symbols on the screen. "This was their script. This vessel is of their design." "A dead race?" Xanthos snarled. Their tomb ship now threatens to become our own. What do the archives say of their technology, their warfare? They say little, Lyra confessed. Only that their conflicts were absolute. They did not fight for territory, but for ideology. They did not seek to subjugate, but to erase. Their weapons did not merely break things, they rewrote the laws of physics. The stories end with their sudden disappearance. A final great war that culminated in their mutual extinction. A flash of light from their home system, and then silence. A silence that has lasted for centuries. The conclave chamber, once a bastion of Cathar confidence, now felt like a fragile bubble in an ocean of ancient horrors. They were not the first. They were merely the ones who had come after, building their civilization on the ashes of a species so terrible it had consumed itself. And now, one of its ghosts was rising from the grave. The thrumming from the projection intensified. A new alert flashed on the screen, a stark crimson sigil that pulsed with urgency. Elder Prime, the chief sensor analyst's voice echoed through the chamber, stripped of all calm. The vessel, it is moving. Tectonic plates are shattering. It is breaking free of the planet. On the display, the wireframe schematic began to ascend. The planet of Xylos 7, its tomb for millennia, was cracking apart, shedding its crust like dead skin. Vorlag watched, his 3 hearts beating a frantic, illogical rhythm. The ghost was not just waking, it was rising. A mountain of metal and forgotten fury was pulling itself from its ancient slumber. And then came the final, chilling report from the analysts. The ship, now free of its terrestrial prison and floating silent and immense in the void, had set a course. Its trajectory was a straight, unwavering line, plotted with terrifying precision. It was coming for Catharia. It was coming for them. The journey of the human vessel was a slow, agonizing procession that etched itself into the Cathar psyche. For weeks, it was a point of light on their long-range sensors, a harbinger of a fate they could not comprehend. It did not travel through folded space as Cathar ships did, tearing a temporary wound in reality to cross vast distances in an instant. Instead, it moved through conventional space at a velocity that should have been impossible, warping the fabric of the universe before it in a gentle, continuous wave. It did not burn fuel. It seemed to draw energy from the vacuum itself, a silent, effortless predator gliding through the cosmic sea. The Grand Fleet, a magnificent armada of crystalline warships that had been the undisputed symbol of Cathar power for 1,000 years, was assembled at the edge of their core system. Xanthos commanded from the bridge of the indomitable will, a vessel that had never known a rival. Now, it felt like a child's toy arrayed against the coming tide. The conclave chamber had become a permanent vigil. Sleep was a luxury none of them could afford. The debate had shifted from what is it to how do we survive it. Xanthos was relentless in his argument for a preemptive strike. We must engage it at maximum range, he insisted, his voice raw from exhaustion and strain. Our gravitic lances can project a disruptive field that should, in theory, destabilize its propulsion. We must cripple it before it reaches the inner system. To allow it to get any closer is to invite our own extinction. You speak of theories, high strategist, Lyra countered, her usual serenity worn thin, revealing a core of fierce intellectual resolve. The archives, fragmented as they are, describe human warships as being shielded by event horizons, localized, self-contained singularities that consumed all incoming energy and matter. Firing upon it might not only be useless, it could be akin to feeding it. We would be providing the very energy it needs to power its weapons. So we do nothing, Xanthos roared, his composure finally breaking. We simply wait for this relic to park itself in our skies and pass judgment upon us. This is not logic, Lorekeeper, this is suicide. This is caution, Vorlag interjected, his voice cutting through the rising hysteria. He looked older, the lines on his carapace deeper, the light in his eyes dimmed by the immense pressure of his office. We still have no indication of its intent. It has not powered weapons. It has not hailed us. It has not deviated from its course. It simply comes. This is not the behavior of a conqueror. A conqueror makes demands. A predator stalks its prey. This is something else. He looked at the main hololithic display. The human vessel was now close enough to be resolved by their optical arrays. It was no longer a point of light, but a shape. And what a shape it was. It was a monument to a forgotten aesthetic of war, a vast gray slab of a thing, a wedge of impossible angles and cyclopean structures. It was not beautiful like the crystalline, Nautilus-inspired ships of the Cathar. It was brutal, functional, and terrifyingly ancient. Its hull was scarred and pitted not by battle, but by the passage of eons. Micrometeoroids had etched fine lines across its surface, cosmic radiation had bleached its once black armor to a mottled gray, and yet it felt perfect, unyielding. a thing built to outlast stars. It was so vast that it had its own faint gravitational field, and small motes of interstellar dust now orbited it like tiny moons. It absorbed light, creating a patch of absolute blackness against the starfield, a hole in reality. And it was utterly, profoundly silent. No engine emissions, no energy leakage, no communication signals on any frequency the Cathar could monitor. The silence was the most unnerving part of all. It was the silence of a tomb, or the silence of a judge. As it crossed the threshold of the Catharia system, the Grand Fleet moved to intercept. A wall of Cathar warships, bristling with energy projectors and gravitic cannons, formed a defensive line. Xenthos, from his command ship, sent a final, desperate plea to the Conclave. Elder Prime, give the order, we must strike now, while we still have the chance to dictate the terms of engagement. Vorlag stood before the display, watching the immense, silent shape glide toward the heart of his civilization. He felt the weight of 1 billion lives on his shoulders. A single command from him would either save his people or doom them. He looked at Lyra, who simply shook her head, a silent plea for patience. The archives whispered of human self-destruction. What if this ship was not a weapon, but a coffin? A final, dead remnant of a tragic race, moving on its last reserves of power, its crew long since turned to dust. To attack it would be to desecrate a grave. But what if it was not? What if inside that silent hull a consciousness was watching, waiting, judging their reaction? Hold your fire, high strategist, Vorlag commanded, his voice resonating with an authority that defied argument. Do not power your primary weapons. Maintain a defensive posture only. Let it make the first move. On the bridge of the indomitable will, Xenthos clenched his talons until they threatened to crack, but he relayed the order. The fleet waited, a line of jeweled warships facing down a mountain of dead iron. The human supercarrier, which the Cathar had named Ghost, continued its inexorable approach. It passed the outer planets, its shadow falling across their barren, icy surfaces. It ignored the Cathar fleet, gliding past them as if they were insignificant gnats. It moved with a purpose that was both serene and terrifying, its destination clear, a stable, high orbit over Catharia itself. The tension in the conclave chamber became a physical thing, a pressure that made the very air feel thick and heavy. The citizens of Catharia, now aware of the silent visitor in their sky, looked up in a mixture of awe and primal fear. The ship was so large it was visible even during the day, a sliver of impossible darkness against the brilliant blue of their sky. And then something changed. As the Ghost settled into its final orbital position, a single point of light appeared on its ventral side. It was not a weapon port. It was too small, too focused. One of the Cathar communication analysts cried out in shock. Elder Prime, we are receiving a signal, but it's not radio, it's not light, it's gravity. The concept was absurd. The Cathar used gravity for propulsion, for defense, but to use it for communication. The level of control required, the sheer subtlety of it, was beyond their most advanced theoretical models. It was like trying to sculpt a statue with a hurricane, yet the signal was there. A complex, layered wave of microgravity fluctuations, pulsing in a clear, repeating pattern. It was a language, a mathematical language, pure and simple, the universal tongue. Their best linguists and mathematicians scrambled to decode it, their minds reeling from the elegance and complexity of the transmission. It was not a demand. It was not a threat. It was an equation, a proof of sentience. And embedded within the mathematical framework was a simple, profound message, a request. It is an invitation, Lyra whispered, her eyes wide as she read the translated data stream. They are inviting us to communicate. They are transmitting coordinates, not on their vessel, but on our third moon Praxis. They are proposing a meeting, in person. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of panicked debate. To meet them, to place themselves in the physical presence of a being from that vessel, it was unthinkable. Xenthos was apoplectic. A trap! They lure us out of our defenses to capture or kill our leadership. We must refuse. But Vorlag saw it differently. It was an act of profound de-escalation. They had the power to obliterate his fleet, to boil his world's oceans from orbit. Instead, they offered dialogue. They chose a neutral, empty location. They gave the Cathar the tactical advantage, the choice of when and how to approach. It was an act of trust, or an act of such supreme confidence that it bordered on the divine. We will accept, Vorlag said, his voice silencing the chamber. I will go. Lord Keeper Lyra, you will accompany me. High Strategist, you will have command of the fleet. If this is a trap, if we do not return, you will enact Protocol 0. You will not allow them to take Catharia. You will burn it to the bedrock first. Xenthos stared, his warrior's mind unable to process the Elder Prime's decision. It was the ultimate gamble, a move born not of strategy, but of a desperate hope that he had read the silent visitor correctly. That this was not an act of war, but something far, far stranger. The surface of Praxis was a desolate, silent landscape of gray dust and jagged rock formations, untouched for eons save for the occasional meteor strike. The Cathar shuttle, a sleek teardrop-shaped vessel, landed with a whisper of its gravitic drive, its crystalline hull stark against the monochrome terrain. Vorlag and Lyra disembarked, their environmental suits sealed against the hard vacuum. Before them, a few hundred yards away, stood the human vessel. It was small, a mere shuttle by their standards, but it shared the same brutal, angular design as the supercarrier that now hung in the sky above them, a permanent eclipse blocking out a patch of stars. A ramp had lowered from its side, but the interior was dark. Nothing emerged. They waited. The silence of the moon was absolute, a pressure on the senses. Vorlag felt the illogical thrum of anxiety again. He had faced down political rivals, managed planetary crises, and guided his people through every challenge for 200 cycles. But here, on this barren rock under the gaze of a ghost ship, he felt like a child in the dark. He was about to meet a representative of the species that had, according to their own legends, torn a hole in reality itself in their final, terrible war. Then a figure appeared at the top of the ramp. It was tall and slender, encased in a form-fitting, bone-white suit that seemed to shimmer with its own faint light. The helmet was a smooth, opaque dome, reflecting the starfield and the distant, blue-white jewel of Catharia. The figure descended the ramp with a slow, deliberate grace, its movements fluid and economical. It stopped at the bottom, standing on the lunar dust, and for a long moment simply observed them. Vorlag and Lyra stood their ground, their posture neutral, their breathing disciplined. The figure raised a hand, and the front of its helmet turned transparent. The face within was pale, framed by short, dark hair. Its features were soft, symmetrical, and strangely expressive. The eyes were a deep, startling blue, and they held an expression that Vorlag could not immediately decipher. It was not anger, not arrogance, not hatred. It was a look of profound, ancient weariness, and of infinite patience. A voice, translated into perfect Cathar, but with an odd, melodic cadence, echoed inside their helmets. It was not a broadcast. It was a tight-beam transmission directed only at them. "I am Archivist Alara," the human said. Her voice was calm, a stark contrast to the terrifying scale of the vessel she represented. "Custodian of the memory arc designated Solitude. I thank you for accepting this meeting, Elder Prime Vorlag, Lorekeeper Lyra. I hope we can alleviate your species' understandable apprehension." Vorlag found his voice, forcing it to remain steady. "Archivist, you pilot a warship of a scale we can barely comprehend. You have parked it in our sky without declaration or explanation. Apprehension is a mild term for what my people are feeling. We wish to know your intent. Why are you here?" The human, Alara, tilted her head slightly. It was a gesture of contemplation. "The Solitude is not a warship," she said, her voice gentle. "Not anymore. It was built for a war, it is true, the last war of my people, but its final purpose was not to fight, it was to endure." "Endure?" Lyra asked, her intellectual curiosity overcoming her fear. "What do you mean?" Alara took a step forward. "Humanity, we were a species of extremes. Our capacity for creation was matched only by our capacity for destruction. We reached a technological apex where our weapons could unmake reality, and we turned them upon ourselves. In the final days, as our civilization tore itself apart, a different path was chosen by a few, not victory, not survival in the conventional sense, but preservation." She gestured up at the colossal shape in the sky. "The Solitude is not a carrier. It is an ark, a library. It carries no soldiers, no colonists, no weapons. It carries only the memory of our species, the sum total of our knowledge, our art, our philosophy, our music. And in cryogenic stasis, the genetic codes of every life form from our world, including our own. It is a seed, designed to weather the storm of our self-destruction, buried and silent, waiting for the galaxy to grow quiet again." Vorlag and Lyra were stunned into silence. This was not a conqueror. It was a librarian, a ghost tending a graveyard. "The energy signature, the rising from the planet," Vorlag stammered, his mind struggling to reconcile this information with the terror of the preceding weeks. "The Solitude's reawakening protocol was automated," Alara explained. "It was programmed to reactivate when certain galactic conditions were met, a sustained period of low-level interstellar radiation, stable stellar activity, and the presence of a technologically sophisticated, non-hostile civilization. Your civilization, the Cathar, were the final trigger. The ship's long-dormant systems came online. Its journey here was not an act of aggression. It was the fulfillment of its primary directive, to find a stable, mature culture and share the knowledge we saved, to ensure that the idea of humanity was not lost forever to the silence of our own making. The sheer, staggering humility of it was overwhelming. A species with the power to unmake stars had chosen, as their final act, to become a memory, to offer their entire legacy as a gift to a younger race. The Cathar had feared an invading army, a wrathful god from a bygone era. They were met instead by a single, sad-eyed archivist and her library ship. You wish to give us your knowledge?" Lyra asked, her voice filled with a new kind of awe. "All of it." "We wish to share it," Alara corrected gently, "in the hope that you might learn from our triumphs and, more importantly, from our catastrophic failures. We do not seek to influence your culture, only to add our story to the galactic chorus. We were a brief, violent, beautiful star. We hope our light in its passing might illuminate the path for others." Xanthos, watching the exchange from the bridge of the indomitable will, saw the biosigns of his leaders stabilize, their stress levels plummeting. He saw the human make no threatening moves. The entire strategic situation, the framework of his reality for the past month, dissolved into absurdity. He had prepared for a war against a ghost, an echo. His grand fleet, the pride of the Cathar, was arrayed against a floating museum. He felt a profound sense of shame, followed by an even more profound sense of wonder. Vorlag looked from the small, calm human before him to the colossal ark in the sky. He saw it now not as a weapon, but as a tombstone of unimaginable sadness and nobility. A monument to a species that had touched the face of godhood and in its final moments of wisdom had chosen to step away. "Your civilization must have been magnificent, Archivist Alara," he said, the words coming from a place of deep, sincere reverence. Alara's expression softened, a faint, melancholic smile touching her lips. "It was, and it was terrible. We hope you will be wiser." She then extended her hand, an open palm. It was a gesture the Cathar Universal Translator identified from 1 billion archived sources, an offering of peace, a sign of trust. After a moment's hesitation, Vorlag stepped forward and placed his own 3-fingered hand against hers. On the barren moon of Praxis, under the silent gaze of the memory arc Solitude, 2 civilizations, one ancient and lost, one young and vibrant, finally made contact. And the universe felt infinitely larger and more filled with sorrow and hope than ever before. The days that followed were a period of cautious, exhilarating discovery. The Solitude, under the guidance of its AI, which Alara simply called the Warden, began a systematic and respectful transfer of knowledge. It was not a data dump. It was a curated, careful sharing of information, tailored to what the Cathar could understand and safely integrate. They were given access to human mathematics, which treated spacetime not as a constant, but as a malleable fabric. They learned of human art, of music that could convey emotions the Cathar had never conceived of visual art that captured both the sublime beauty of their world and the depths of their despair. They learned of human philosophy, a chaotic and brilliant tapestry of 1,000 competing ideas about the meaning of existence, a stark contrast to the Cathar's single, unified doctrine of measured progression. The conclave chamber was transformed. The hololithic display no longer showed a threat, but a gateway. Lyra spent nearly all her time in communion with the Warden, her mind alight with the sheer volume of history, of stories, of failed empires and fleeting moments of grace. Xanthos, humbled and changed, was tasked with a new kind of strategy, not of war, but of integration. He and his best minds studied human engineering, marveling at technologies that seemed to border on magic, stable temporal fields for preservation, zero-point energy extraction, and the quiet, impossibly elegant gravitic drive of the Solitude. He learned that the ship's hull was not merely metal. It was a form of programmable matter that could reconfigure itself on a molecular level, repairing damage and adapting its structure as needed. The reason it was so scarred was because the Warden had not deemed it necessary to repair cosmetic damage over the centuries. Its integrity was perfect. Vorlag and Alara met often, sometimes on the neutral ground of Praxis, sometimes via secure transmission. They spoke of leadership, of the burdens of history, of the future. Vorlag learned of the human concept of hope, an illogical but powerful driving force that had propelled them to both their greatest achievements and their deepest follies. Alara, in turn, seemed to study the Cathar with a quiet, observant intensity, fascinated by their order, their unity of purpose, and their deep-seated aversion to chaos. Your people achieved a level of societal harmony that we only ever dreamed of, she told him during one conversation, her image shimmering in the hololithic display. We were always a fractured species, a collection of warring tribes even when we reached the stars. That chaos was our strength, it drove our innovation, our art, but it was also our doom. We have always believed that chaos is an entropy to be contained, not a fire to be harnessed, Vorlag replied. Your history suggests we were not wrong, but it also suggests we have been incomplete. We have valued the equation, but not the poetry. Your arrival has given us the poetry, archivist. A bond of deep respect formed between the two species. The Cathar offered the humans, or what was left of them, a new home, a pristine garden world in a quiet sector of their space where they could, if they chose, begin again. Ilara, speaking for the warden and the silent, sleeping passengers of the Solitude, politely declined for the time being. Our purpose is not to rebuild an empire, she explained. It is to be a repository, a warning and a gift. For now, we will remain here in orbit of your world as partners and friends if you will have us. The conclave agreed without dissent. The ghost in their sky had become a guardian, a silent teacher. The great reveal, the one that truly cemented the new reality, came when the Cathar were given access to the Solitude's deep-core sensor logs. For centuries, even while buried and dormant, the ship had been listening. Its senses were so fine, so unimaginably more advanced than anything the Cathar possessed, that it could detect the whisper of gravity waves from the dawn of time. As Cathar and human AI worked together to sift through this mountain of cosmic data, they intended to build a more complete map of the universe's history. But they found something else. It was Lyra who first noticed the pattern, a faint, recurring signal buried deep within the cosmic microwave background radiation. It was not a pulsar, not a quasar, not any known natural phenomenon. It was structured, a complex, non-repeating pattern that was nevertheless clearly artificial. It was impossibly ancient, predating the rise of humanity, predating the formation of the Cathar home world, perhaps even predating their galaxy itself. It was a whisper that had been echoing through the cosmos for billions of years, so faint that no one had ever had the tools to hear it. No one until the Solitude awoke. The signal is everywhere, Lyra reported to the conclave, her voice trembling with an excitement that transcended all previous discoveries. Ilara was present, her image projected beside Lyra's. It seems to emanate from the fabric of spacetime itself, but the Warden's analysis, cross-referenced with your most sensitive arrays, has managed to triangulate a probable point of origin, a source vector. On the grand display, a map of the local galactic cluster appeared. A red line extended from their system, out past the edge of the spiral arm, past the neighboring galaxies, and into the profound, empty darkness of the intergalactic void. The line terminated at a point of utter blackness, a region where no galaxies, no light, had ever been observed. We do not believe the signal originates from there, Ilara stated, her calm demeanor for once showing a flicker of something else, a deep, ancient unease. We believe that is merely the point where the signal is weakest, the point from which it is receding. The signal itself is a background phenomenon. The Warden believes it is not a message being sent to anyone. It is a message that has been left behind, a residue. A residue of what? Zenthos asked, his strategic mind immediately trying to classify the new information as a threat or an opportunity. Ilara and Lyra exchanged a look, a shared moment of profound, terrifying understanding. We have managed to decode a fragment of it, Ilara said softly. The language is not linguistic, it is mathematical, conceptual. It is a warning. The chamber fell silent. Every Cathar and the lone human representative focused on the screen. A series of symbols appeared, a translation of the concepts pulled from the eons-old signal. The words were simple, but their implication was monstrous. It sees the light. The brightest stars burn fastest. The silence is a shield. Do not wake the old ONES. Be quiet. A coldness deeper than the vacuum of space settled over the conclave. The mystery of the Solitude was solved, but in its place, a new, infinitely greater and more terrible mystery had been unveiled. The Fermi paradox, the question of why a vast and ancient universe appeared so empty of intelligent life, had been a subject of philosophical debate for the Cathar. They had always assumed they were simply the first. That comforting illusion was now shattered. They were not the first. They were merely the ones living in the quiet aftermath. The silence of the galaxy was not natural. It was imposed. It was a state of hiding. Humanity, in their brief, brilliant, chaotic reign, had been a supernova of activity, a beacon of technological and social energy that must have blazed across the cosmos. Perhaps their self-destruction was not entirely their own doing. Perhaps they had attracted an unwanted gaze, and in their final moments they had built the solitude, an ark of memory, and buried it, choosing to go silent, to hide their light under a bushel of rock and ice. Its reawakening and its meeting with the Cathar had just created a new beacon. Two advanced civilizations, sharing knowledge, creating a nexus of activity brighter than anything the galaxy had seen in eons. Vorlag looked at the projection of Alara. Her face was grim, she understood. The human story was not over, it had just found a new and perhaps final chapter. "The ghost we feared was your ship," Vorlag said, his voice a low whisper that carried across the silent chamber. "We were wrong. The real ghosts are the ones who left this message, the ones who enforced the silence." Alara nodded slowly. "Humanity's greatest sin was not our self-destruction. It was our noise. We never learned to listen. We only knew how to shout. We thought we were alone in the dark, so we lit a fire to keep ourselves warm." She looked at Vorlag, her weary blue eyes seeming to pierce through the holographic projection, seeing not just him, but the future of his entire species. "Now we are both standing in its light, and I fear the dark has finally noticed us." In the grand conclave chamber, the intelligent light of the Cathar seemed to dim, to shrink away from the terrifying new darkness that had just been revealed. The alliance between the Cathar and the last remnant of humanity was forged not just in shared knowledge and mutual respect, but in a shared, dawning terror. The conflict they had prepared for was a phantom. The true challenge, the true test of their combined wisdom and strength, was only just beginning. Out there in the silent, waiting void, something ancient had been listening, and now they were no longer quiet.